This week, I had the chance to sit down with none other than Anthony Scaramucci, a dynamic force in finance, politics, and media. Best known as the founder and managing partner of SkyBridge Capital, which is managed up to $10 billion in assets, Anthony has built a reputation as a bold thinker, resilient entrepreneur, and an outspoken voice on Wall Street and beyond. From growing up on Long Island to rising through the ranks at Goldman Sachs, launching SkyBridge and navigating the stormy waters of public life, including his headline making 11-day stint as White House communications director, Anthony's story is one of reinvention, grit, and relentless drive. He's authored several books on investing and leadership, and through his SALT conferences, he's created a global platform for dialogue across finance, tech, and policy. In this conversation, we unpack his formative years, his evolving relationship with failure, and how his identity as an outsider has shaped his approach to both business and life. We also dive into the people who have impressed him most, what's next on his horizon, and his best advice for the younger generation. I enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you guys do too. Thank you for joining me, Anthony. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
It's good to be here. I appreciate it, Amir. All right, fire away.
So I want to go back to your upbringing, your childhood. How do you think your childhood and talk me through some experiences in it that you think shaped the person you are today?
Well, I mean, I don't want to glorify it, right? I mean, because this happens, you end up with some modicum of success, and then you want to go back and hagiographically look at your childhood and sort of glorify it. I would say to you that I was anxious as a child. If I'm really being brutally honest, there was a financial dilemma always in the house. There was constant financial anxiety. My father was a hard worker, but he was limited by his skill set. He started out as a laborer, then became a crane operator. Then he got older, became a dispatcher, and these were all hourly jobs, all tied to a union. And so when economic expansion was happening, he had lots of overtime. That was better for the family. When we were going through recessions, like what happened in the 1970s, it was very painful for the family. And so, I had a great childhood too, though, meaning, I lived in a great middle class neighborhood. I went to a great public school. I had really good teachers. I had a great sports program that I benefited from as a kid. And so, I had a nice childhood. I'm not trying to say that I didn't have a nice childhood, but I had financial anxiety. I could remember there'd be fights in our home growing up related to money. And so that got me to I think that turned the screw on me or coiled the spring on me to get out and get to work, and I started working when I was 11. I got a paper route, and then I built that paper route into a pretty colossal paper route in the town. I had this idea that I went to my manager. I said, look, I need free papers on Wednesdays. Thursdays was what we called collect. You would knock on the doors of these middle-aged women. He'd ask them for money for the subscription to the newspaper, Long Island Newsday. And so I got free papers. I went up and down the apartment buildings in the town I was in, dropping off free papers for all these Irish and Italian women. And then on Thursday, I would knock on the door and say, hey, Mrs. O'Callaghan, did you like the paper? And then, would you like to subscribe to it? I guilted them all into it, right? And so I had a pretty decent paper route. I probably had $40 or $50 a week coming in at the age of 12. And I used to split that with my mom, try to help her out, with the family's budget. And then I ended up as a stock boy at the local Key Food. If you heard cleanup on aisle 7, that was me. I would go and mop up the dill pickles, or, yeah, don't eat a rotisserie chicken. I mean, you want to talk about my childhood? I cooked rotisserie chickens at the local supermarket with the apron and the hat and everything. I had the syringe. I put the mixture into the, basting the chickens. And, I guess a cautionary tale from my childhood, I don't recommend you buy a rotisserie cooked chicken from the local supermarket because you just put too much salt and sugar and chicken broth into those things. They taste great, but I mean, your eyeballs will be bulging out of your head from the dehydration. So that's another lesson from my childhood. But I worked in a motorcycle shop. I delivered and sold mopeds. I learned how to drive when I was 14. I crashed the car when I was 15. It was a rough and tumble upbringing. My parents were not focused on education, so I'm sort of a big anomaly there. If you looked at my cousins, my brother went to college. He was the only one. There's 16 or 17 of my cousins. Very few went to college. So my upbringing was, I think, good, but it was anxious. I was definitely worried about my parents. I was worried that my parents were going to run out of money. I chose my career not out of love. I do love what I do, Amir, but I chose my career out of financial anxiety. I figured if I went to work on Wall Street and I was halfway successful, that would solve a lot of my financial problems.
Yeah. And I read a couple articles where you talk about Superman and Batman, and I'd love for you to kind of briefly describe those and elaborate on both of those figures. But what I'd also like you to do is talk a little bit about who your heroes were, both as a child and now, and what do you think that says about yourself and the people you look up to?
Okay, I'm gonna stay away from saying that my parents are my heroes or my grandparents. I'll talk about mentors.
Please do.
There was a guidance counselor by the name of John Zanetti. He's the one that told my parents to send me to Tufts, not to local state school. There was Saul Gittleman. He's 91 years old. He was the provost at Tufts University. He took me under his wing, helped me get into Harvard Law School. Uh, Tough love from him when I was not doing certain things well. He hit me over the head hard, told me to get my shit together. So I always have an admiration for him. I guess, when you talk about literary role models, I would say to people that if you read the Iliad of the Odyssey and you read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations and you read one Shakespearean play, you would be ahead of just about everybody else in terms of understanding how human beings interact with each other and what the elements are and what the triggers are for the social animal that lives on this earth known as a human. And so I would say that those are intellectual role models. On the investment side, I probably devoured everything that Warren Buffett had ever written. I'd like to say that I followed him, but it was hard to follow him because I always had, if I had held things longer in my portfolio, I would have done better, frankly. I think that's the lesson from Buffett. But, I needed money for a house, or I needed money for my kids' tuition, or I needed money for different things. I would have just been better just holding on to the assets, probably even borrowing against them. But that's somebody that I look up to and admire. When you talk about the comic books, when I was a kid, feeling that anxiety, that was a form of escapism for me. So on Wednesdays, the new comics came out. I got my money on Thursdays. I used to save my money, have to wait till the following week. The new comics, the Superman or the Batman, came out on a Wednesday at the local stationery store. And I have a big collection of comic books. I've got some Golden Age, Silver Age comics, comics from the 1970s when I grew up. And what I tell people, Superman was an interesting, iconic, mythological American mythology. It was invented by two young Jews, Jewish men, Jewish boys in Cleveland, Ohio. It was a direct response to what Adolf Hitler was saying about the Übermensch, the overman, the man that Nietzsche described as being more powerful than others, part of this German iconic culturalism. And obviously the Jews were inferior and the Aryans were superior. And so these two young, brilliant Jewish men, Joel Siegel and Jerry Schuster, they invented Superman. It was an American version of this Ubermensch, and but they instilled in this character American mythology. Of course, it's a loner, outsider, an immigrant, right? Strange visitor from a foreign planet, has to be adopted by a virtuous American family. Of course, it's a Midwestern family that has classic hometown Midwestern values. And then it's a journey, a hero's arc story where the young boy with the superpowers is trained by his kids, trained by his school, trained by the mores of his time to be a good person, goes into the city to find his career. And he stands for truth, justice, and the American way. And he's good-hearted. He's aspirational. He's who we want to be. Superman is a representation of how we'd like to see ourselves. I always say that Batman is actually who we are. Batman's dark. He's got good things about him and bad things about him. He's always fighting demons in his own mind. Yes, he's fighting crime, but he's able to fight the crime because he thinks like a criminal, and he's got these dark parts of his personality. And so to really understand human beings, we're light and dark. We have the capacity to kill each other. We have the capacity to love each other and take care of each other. And we have to possess ourselves with the right thoughts and possess ourselves with the right ideas so that we take care of each other. We're at our best when we're serving each other. We're at our worst when we're taking from people without recompense. And so for me, those are sort of iconic models and mental models that I try to think about. I tell people that work here at SkyBridge, we have a couple $1 billion under management. They work with me. They don't work for me. This is a collaboration. It's not I feel like you get more out of people if they're rowing the boat with you and they feel like they're in it with you, as opposed to, this sort of command control structure or this over bossing or over bullying. It's one of the reasons why I couldn't really get on with Trump inside the White House. I'm not a student of or a fan of that type of behavior.
You've failed many times throughout your career, and you're very truthful, transparent, and honest about your failure and coming back from that. I think there was an article that was written a couple months ago called The Immortal Anthony Scaramucci. And I think that's a very good way of describing you. But I'd love for you to take us through your career from a high level, but focus on the role that failure played in your career and how you came back from that. Because I've noticed in your career, every time you fail, you come back stronger.
Well, the first thing I would say is it's a fun title, Immortal, but I think that the first thing we have to recognize is our mortality. I think that we're at our best again when we are real with ourselves. We have a tendency to lie to ourselves. We live in some level of denialism. We don't like to think of ourselves dying. We get up in the morning and say, okay, we're going to keep going. So therefore it sustains us. The other person's going to die. The famous thing when you're in the platoon boat, the guy on your left and the guy on your right's going to die. And neither one of them's you, but you don't think that. And so, but we are mortal. And I think when we face our mortality, like Marcus Aurelius said, memento mori, in this moment I can die. I think it can be therapeutic for people. I think it can force a perspective. And so I would say to you that I'm very mortal, but I'm also very aware of my mortality. So I want to go out with a good blast here. I want to help people grow a business, live with some level of purpose, give away some money to charity, but also charity starts at the home. Take care of my family members and my extended family members. Take care of the people that work here in the organization with me. I think that's really what it's about. I think you get your highest joy, highest level of psychic happiness when you're integrated with others. This is a social organism. There's a hive to being a human, and when you're working with the hive and making the hive better, more successful, you're better. When you're too cynical or too despairing or too pessimistic, I think you can make things worse. And I also think that your attitude is everything in life. And I got fired from the White House. I got humiliated 8 years ago. I got lit up on late night television. Videos played to me. I was told. I think Steve Colbert said I was Tony Soprano on the Potomac, and Bill Maher said I was a Jersey Shore cast member. And I'm just scratching the surface of some of the stuff that I had to hear. And you could take that and be saddened by it, and you could be remorseful, and you could dig a hole for yourself and hide in it, or you can take yourself less seriously and laugh about it. And when I got invited on those shows, I went on. It was a good sport. I didn't pretend that the stuff didn't happen to me, and I didn't try to run from it. I went towards it, not away from it. You know.
Yeah. And how do you think your relationship with failure has evolved through your career? Because the earliest point in your career in which I think you can describe you failed is when you almost got fired from Goldman
Not
and moved
almost.
to
No, I was fired. No, I got
got
fired.
fired.
I got fired on February 1st of 1991. I got rehired on March 28th, but on February 1st, it was a Friday night. The senior partner in the real estate department let me go, and they gave me a severance check, and they told me that there was no room for me left at the firm. I had to go find a job, and I mean, I that was a big blow to me. I had gone to Goldman. I was 18 months into the job. I showed up every day, worked hard. Frankly, I sucked at the job, but I was trying. They were going through a real estate recession, and they made a decision to let people go. I was one of those people. I was ill-fitted for that job, and so the a learning lesson for younger people is don't take the job that you think is cool, or don't take the job that you're taking to try to impress your friends. Take the job that you think you're going to be good at, or that you like. I took the wrong job. It was real estate investment banking. Terrible job for me. So they fired me. And, and I sucked at the job. So no harm, no foul there. I got lucky where Goldman was hiring in another area of the firm. And so I got rehired into Goldman. That was a good experience for me. But again, I would say this to you, that was lucky too. And I got into a good job that I liked. And so again, there's some things that are going to happen in your life that are circumstantial. There's some things that are going to break in a way that are very lucky for you. There's some things that break in a way that are not lucky. You're going to take the wrong job at the wrong time. I think you have to flow with it.
Yeah.
When I got fired, I made a joke that next day they let me stay in the office for a week to get my stuff together and start to begin a transition. And the Gulf War was going on at the time. And I said, it's too bad I didn't have any Patriot missiles to block the incoming Scud that hit me. And people laughed. It made them feel better because I wasn't trying to make them feel bad about my firing. I was trying to roll with it. And what I would say to you in life is that that's it. That's the secret. Expect failure. Look here. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 15.
15. Okay. So if I took out a sheet of paper the day you were born, so you were born in the year 2010?
2009, August 18th.
2009. All right. So I took a sheet of paper out. Let's say you could read the first day you were born. I said, okay, here's the piece of paper. Here are your parents. You didn't pick them. You didn't pick your location of your birth. You didn't pick your skin color. You didn't pick your nationality or your religious background. And so here's your life. And by the way, guaranteed, you're going to have some disappointment in your life. You're going to have a girl break up with you, or a setback. You're going to have a setback in a business, setback in academics. You're going to have a great thing happen, a bad thing happen. Unfortunately, you're going to experience death. That's part of the human condition. So you'll either be people that you love that die, it'll be you yourself that die. And so I guess the point I'm making is everybody comes in with that checklist. Everybody comes in with that punch card, Amir. Nobody escapes that. Yes, you could be worth $100 billion. You're still dealing with that. Bill Gates said something maybe 25 or 30 years ago now. I always think about it. He said, I'm the richest person in the world. At that time, frankly, he was. His mother was dying of breast cancer. He couldn't save her. It's just unfortunately, there's a start and an end date. Thus far, God's batted 1,000, and we're all destined to die. And so we're going to live this trial and tribulation on earth. Accept it, embrace it. People that can embrace it can ride through failures more easily than people that have these very high, very high and unfair expectations about life.
You've constantly described yourself as an outsider. And my question to you is, how do you think your role as an outsider has changed both how you approach challenges and also move on from setbacks throughout your career?
Oh, I'm an outsider in the following respect. I didn't grow up in New York City. I didn't grow up as a member of the establishment. I didn't grow up in a rich family. There's no legacies at any of the schools that I went to that I could say that I was a part of. I didn't see the inside of a country club until I was in my early 30s. I don't hit a golf ball or swing a tennis racket. And so I'm not really part of the artifice of what would be the establishment. I'm not saying that I'm Jay Gatsby or anything like that because there's nothing nefarious about it. I'm just not a insider. There are comfortable insiders and there are comfortable outsiders, and there are uncomfortable insiders and there are uncomfortable outsiders. So Donald Trump, to me, is an uncomfortable outsider. He grew up wealthy, but he grew up in the outer boroughs. And so he never really got into the flow of the hoi polloi in Manhattan, and it always bothered him. There were several country clubs he couldn't get into, always bothered him. There are country clubs, frankly, Amir, that I couldn't get into. They'd probably want me to landscape the country club before they'd let me in as a member, but I'm comfortable with it. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I'm comfortable in my own skin. You can reject my thought process. You can reject my analytical views. You may dislike or like my personality, but not want me to work in your organization. I'm cool with all that. I went and built my own organization. So I'd always have a job and I wouldn't have to worry about that, or I wouldn't have to worry about refining my personality to suit some type of corporation. And so I guess what I would say to you is, if you're a comfortable outsider, you can take comfort in your outsiderness. And what I mean by that is, I don't care. You know, you could let me into the situation or keep me out of the situation. It doesn't bother me one way or another. I don't have a chip on my shoulder. And I think that can make you pretty resilient because what's important to me is what my family thinks of me. What's important to me is what my wife thinks of me and my children. And I don't really give a shit what you think of me. And I don't care what your listeners think of me. I'm going to tell them what I think. If they like me, that's great. If they want to have a relationship with me, I'm open to it. If they reject me and my thought process, that's okay. Because I have in my heart where I want to go for myself. And so I think if you are comfortable in the way that I'm describing, you can take exogenous risks. You can flip your fund of funds into crypto because you see something that you want to exploit for yourself and your clients, and you're not thinking about the downside failure of that. You're thinking about the upside and you're thinking about the benefit. I'm not measuring myself day to day by what other people think of me, and I'm not flexing myself in an effort to impress anybody. I think those things do make you very resilient if you have that embedded in your philosophy.
And you were talking about flipping your fund of funds into crypto. And at this point in your career, many people would be complacent, but you keep trying new things. You've kept innovating and kept being creative. So my question to you is, what makes you confident to try new things and venture into new spaces, even at this point in your career?
I'm a young guy. I mean, I'm 61 years young. I love the planet, love my family, love my employees and partners, people that work with me. And so I want to be productive. I want to be useful and productive. A couple of years back, I had the opportunity to work out with Arnold Schwarzenegger at Gold's Gym. He's 78, 79 years old. He's hitting the gym and he's writing books. And one of the titles of his book is To Be Useful. So I want to be useful. I'm here. I'm not going to go to the beach. I mean, I can spend 2 days on the beach, then I'm getting bored. What am I going to do? I can write books, which I'm interested in doing. I can talk on podcasts. But what I really like doing is I like coming up with new ideas and I like helping people. And so why not do that if that's something I really like to do? There's a friend of mine. You should probably interview him at some point. His name is David Rubenstein. He's the founder of Carlyle. I went to visit him many years ago. He has a beautiful house on the bluff in Nantucket. It's overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It's absolutely breathtaking. You go to the front door, there's a sign on the house that says, "Rather be working." And there's David Rubenstein letting you know, yeah, he's got money and yeah, he has pleasurable and nice things, but it's not that big of a deal to him. What's a bigger deal to him is that he's working. He just bought he's probably 73 or 74 years old. He just bought the Baltimore Orioles. He grew up as in Section 8 housing and public housing. Poor guy that became extremely rich, and he's now trying to bring a championship to the city of Baltimore, a place that he grew up in. That's my kind of guy. That's the kind of person I'd like to be. If the good Lord blesses me with a long life, hopefully I'll be doing this for the next 20 to 30 years.
And on the topic of David, I'm a big fan of his interviews. Who are the most impressive people you've ever met, or the people that have just fascinated?
Well, I mean,
The
you
most
can.
interesting or impressive
Yeah,
people you've met?
I'm writing down the list. I mean, I'll give you the top three. I think that you would be remiss in not saying that Donald Trump is not impressive. I don't have a good relationship with him, but he is a prodigious political figure. He is the most important political figure of the first 25 years of the 21st century. He's cast a shadow over half of that period of time. And so for me, I would say that he's impressive. I don't like him. I don't like where he wants to take the country. But I mean, I work closely with him, and you have to be impressed with his political instincts and his insights. He's way smarter than people want to give him credit for. Elon Musk, another controversial figure, is just very ironic because if you and I did this interview in 2016 when the Model S came out, Elon, 71% of our fellow Americans knew who he was, and 70% of those people had a favorable opinion of him. They saw him as this eco-friendly, Tony Stark like technologist that was doing good things for mankind. Because he went into politics, 91% of our fellow Americans know who he is, and only 33% of them like him now. But it would be remiss of me to tell you that he's not singularly the most impressive person that I've met in terms of his work ethic, the way his brain works. He's a moneymaker. If he goes back to making money, he'll go on and probably be our first trillionaire. David Rubenstein is a person I have an enormous amount of respect for. Uh, I'm going to tell you something. My father-in-law, and again, I want to leave out my parents, who I've obviously have an enormous amount of respect for, but my father-in-law, who's now deceased, he was a parking attendant. You couldn't have found a nicer person. You couldn't have found a better family person. You couldn't have found a kinder, more forgiving person who didn't judge human frailty so harshly. And he was a parking attendant. So it doesn't just have to be a rich person or a successful politician. It could be somebody in your backyard that you look at and you're like, wow, I got a lot of admiration for that person, and that person's a role model for me. My father-in-law, in many ways, was a role model for me.
If you had to distill down the way you live life into a couple of tenets, what would it be? What kind of central tenets guide the way you live?
Well, again, don't judge human beings so harshly. Don't judge human frailty with great harshness. Be forgiving. Be forgiving of yourself when you make a mistake. Be forgiving of others. There's no need to be in that self-righteous cancellation game. That would be number one. Number two is what I said. Be useful. Get up in the morning. I tell my kids, I'll tell you, Amir, get up in the morning, do one thing for yourself, do one thing for your body physically, walk, work out, make sure you eat right. Okay. And then do one thing for your career. So one thing for yourself for me would probably be reading a book. One thing for my body, I probably will hit the gym or get out and do an afternoon walk or lift weights. And then I'll do one thing for my business and try to do that every day. If you do that every day, incrementally, you'll grow a great big portfolio and a great big success for yourself.
What's next for Anthony Scaramucci?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not really sure. I'm having fun right now. I have a podcast. If you have an interest in listening to these things, it's called the Rest is Politics US. You can find it on Apple and Spotify. I've got another podcast called Open Book where I interview authors. These are fun things for me to do. I do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of writing. I'm in the process of writing another book, which I've got to deliver to the publisher late this summer. And, I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, there's a couple of business ideas that I have. Let me see if we get started on another project here at SkyBridge. I'm active politically. I'm not going to ever run for office or anything like that, but I am active politically. Would like to try to see if we can make things better. Too much tribalism in the country. Maybe we can heal some of that.
This is one final question we ask all of our guests before they log off. If you had to give one piece of advice to a 15-year-old today, whether it be investing advice, career advice, life advice, just one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I'm not going to be able to do that actually, so I'm sorry. I'm going to alter the question. I'm going to give you three pieces of advice, not one.
Perfect.
Number one, I would read everything that you can get your hands on. Be intellectually curious. Don't just do your schoolwork. Do all types of reading. Improve your vocabulary. It'll improve your writing skills. It'll improve your knowledge about the earth. Read fiction and read nonfiction. Number two, be comfortable taking risks. Get yourself in the habit early of taking risks, because if you can do that, it'll lead to higher outcomes for yourself. And then the last thing, and this is the hardest thing, but you idealize yourself and say, what would I be if I knew with 100% certainty I'm not going to fail at it? I don't know what that is for you, but whatever that is, go do that. Okay? Because if you got yourself well read and you got yourself conditioned to take risk, if you go do that, even if you fall on your face a few times, you'll make that. You'll make it, manifest that. Those are the ideas that I would say to a 15-year-old. Don't live in fear. It's a short, quick life. It can be a fun life, but don't live in fear.
I love that. Thank you, Anthony, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed this conversation.
Good to be on. I'm wishing you great success. Okay.